Cannons roar arrows, darken the sky, and armies clash on fields that stretch beyond the horizon. Dust rises from the pounding of thousands of horses' hooves. Soldiers scream as swords meet shields, and the banners of the Ottoman Empire wave triumphantly over conquered cities. From the walls of Constantinople to the plains of Hungary, empires tremble at the sight of their advancing legions. Siege engines crumble ancient fortresses, and the air is thick with the smoke of battle. Victory seems inevitable, yet behind the clash of steel, behind every charge and every cannon shot, there is another war being fought, a war not with soldiers, but with numbers, with debts, with gold moving in shadows. Every conquest, every city taken, comes at a price that no sword can pay. The glory of the battlefield hides a secret force that fuels these campaigns, a force more invisible and more powerful than any army. This is the untold story of the Ottoman Empire's greatest weapon, one that history almost forgot. What if I told you that the rise and fall of one of history's most powerful empires, an empire that lasted over 600 years, was not decided by swords, cannons, or generals alone? What if the secret weapon of the Ottoman Empire wasn't its army, but something far more invisible and far more powerful? Money. For centuries, the Ottomans waged wars across 3 continents. They conquered cities, toppled kingdoms, and shaped the course of history. But behind every victorious campaign, behind every fortress, and every grand palace, there was a hidden financial story. A story of debts, loans, gold, and economic strategies so cunning that they could outlast kings. And yet, eventually, it almost destroyed the empire from within. Today, we uncovered the secret money behind 600 years of Ottoman wars and the lessons it holds for today's world. The Ottoman Empire began in the late 13th century as a small principality in northwestern Anatolia. Its founder, Osman I, was not a king in the grand sense, but a tribal leader with vision. By the time his descendants ruled, the empire had grown into a sprawling dominion, stretching from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia. Yet, empires do not expand on vision alone, they expand on resources. And war is expensive. Every campaign required more than men and horses. It required weapons, food, logistics, and money, lots of money. Unlike modern states that can print currency at will, the Ottomans had no central bank in the modern sense. They relied on a mix of tax farming, trade revenues, and borrowing. And borrowing, as history shows, is never free. In the 14th and 15th centuries, Ottoman wars were mostly local against neighboring Byzantines, and later, Balkan principalities. The cost of these campaigns was often covered by Timar, a system of land grants in exchange for military service. Soldiers were paid in the produce of land, not cash. This system allowed the empire to expand rapidly without sinking into debt. But as the Ottomans moved into Europe, into regions like Hungary, Serbia, and the Balkans, their campaigns became longer, armies larger, and logistical costs skyrocketed. Suddenly, the spoils of war were not enough. The empire needed cash up front and fast. Ottoman rulers began borrowing from wealthy merchants and foreign financiers, Italian banking houses, Jewish merchant families, and eventually, European trading powers became the invisible backbone of Ottoman military campaigns. Many of these loans were secured not against the empire's assets, but against future taxes. Essentially, the Ottomans promised creditors, "We will conquer, we will collect, and then we will pay you." At first, it worked. Wars were funded, cities fell. Glory was achieved. But like any system dependent on credit, it carried risk. The pinnacle of Ottoman power came in the 15th and 16th centuries. Under Mehmed II, the empire captured Constantinople in 1453. Victory made possible not only by brilliant strategy and elite soldiers, but by massive financial mobilization. Loans were taken from Venetian and Genoese bankers. Specialized engineers, artisans, and mercenaries were paid up front. Then came Suleiman the Magnificent in the 16th century, whose campaigns in Hungary, the Middle East, and North Africa required armies of over 100,000 men. These were not cheap expeditions. Money flowed from state treasuries, tax farmers, and international financiers alike. Credit became their silent weapon. Empires, it seemed, could be bought as much as they could be fought. Interestingly, This system also created unintended allies. European financiers, who were technically the Ottomans' rivals, were now invested in their success. If the empire failed, they lost money. So, the very people who could oppose the Ottomans politically ended up funding their victories economically. This period is often celebrated as the empire's golden age, but the seeds of vulnerability were already sown. By the 17th century, the empire was still expanding, but its financial system was under immense strain. The Timar system was breaking down. Wars were longer and more expensive. Inflation, mismanagement, and corruption drained resources. To keep the empire afloat, sultans increasingly borrowed from European financiers, often at extremely high interest rates. Some historians estimate that by the late 1600s, the Ottoman state was paying up to 40% of its revenue in debt service alone. This created a vicious cycle. Wars needed money. Money came from loans. Debt required more revenue, which demanded more taxation or conquest, and failure to expand or collect taxes triggered more borrowing. The breaking point came in the late 17th century during the Great Turkish War against the Holy League. The empire suffered devastating defeats at Vienna and elsewhere. Military losses meant fewer spoils and fewer taxes, but the debt still had to be repaid. To meet obligations, the empire debased its currency, reducing silver content in coins, which caused rampant inflation. Social unrest grew. Revolts erupted, and suddenly, the financial system that once fueled expansion was now accelerating decline. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the empire was often called the sick man of Europe. Battles were still fought, but now wars were often financed by foreign loans, mainly from Britain, France, and the Netherlands. The empire even created the Ottoman Public Debt Administration in 1881, allowing European creditors to directly collect revenue from Ottoman sources, a humiliating acknowledgement that financial power had overtaken political and military control. The Ottomans tried to fix their financial problems in several ways: tax reforms, military downsizing, and economic modernization. Yet each solution was either too late, half-hearted, or undermined by corruption and entrenched interest groups. In the end, no reform could fully reverse the dependence on foreign credit, and the empire's decline accelerated into the 19th and early 20th centuries, culminating in its collapse after World War I. Here's where it gets even more fascinating. The Ottoman story is not just history at essay warning. Today, nations, corporations, and even individuals rely heavily on credit to fund ambitions. Look at global debt today. World debt exceeds $300 trillion, more than 3 times global GDP. Countries borrow to fund wars, infrastructure, or social programs. Like the Ottomans, many are trapped in cycles of borrowing to pay off previous debt. Even the patterns are eerily similar. Over-reliance on short-term borrowing, ignoring structural reforms until it's too late, foreign lenders gaining leverage over domestic policy. Financial power is invisible but absolute. Empires fall not just to enemies on the battlefield, but to the constraints of credit and money management. 3 key takeaways. First, money is a weapon as lethal as any army. The Ottomans fought with swords and cannons. Yes, but their ability to secure loans and mobilize finances often decided the outcome long before battle lines were drawn. Second, short-term gains can create long-term vulnerability. Borrowing to fund wars or growth might solve immediate problems, but without sustainable systems, it leads to dependence and, eventually, loss of sovereignty. Third, patterns repeat across history. From the Ottomans to modern nations, the cycle of debt, overextension, and financial vulnerability is a constant. Recognizing it is the first step toward avoiding it. The Ottoman Empire lasted over 600 years, conquering lands and shaping civilizations. Yet in the end, the empire's fate was determined not by generals, sultans, or even enemies, but by a system of money, credit, and debt that no sword could defeat. So, the next time you hear about empires, wars, or even governments borrowing billions, remember, history has a silent controller money, and it always leaves its mark. If you found this exploration of the hidden financial forces behind history fascinating, hit the like button, subscribe for more deep dives into the untold stories of empires and economics, and share this video with anyone curious about the invisible power shaping our world. History isn't just about what happened. It's about understanding why it happened and how it still echoes today.